I am thrilled to be able to introduce Dr. Stacy M. Spencer. Um, Dr. Spencer is a professor of psychology and director of the Bachelor Science in Health Psychology program at MCPHS University in Boston, a recipient of the MCPHS Trustees Award for Teaching Excellence. Dr. Spencer is widely recognized for her innovative approaches to career development in psychology education. She served as a core member of APA's Committee on Associate and Baccalaureate Education, or CABE, task force that prepared the skillful psychology student prepared for success in the 21st century workplace. This initiative, and I know she's going to actually talk about that a little bit today, it really helps psychology students identify and articulate the transferable skills that they get through their psychology education, those same skills that are really highly valued across industries. So this framework has been widely adopted by instructors, advisors, and students to enhance career readiness and inform curriculum design. Dr. Spencer, I've known Dr. Spencer for a few years now. She is really a passionate advocate for helping students explore diverse career paths with a psychology degree. I've heard her talk many times and I always learn something new. So we are really thrilled that she was willing to offer this webinar for us today. So please do join me in offering a warm welcome to Dr. Spencer. And I will hand this over to you now to share your slides. Martha, if you haven't already, maybe you could drop the slides in the chat right now.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for that introduction, Sue. I'm thrilled. When I saw how many people were coming in here, I couldn't believe it. It is interesting for me to be sitting and talking. One thing that Sue said is I'm very passionate about this. I get really excited talking about this topic, and I'm sitting here, which is odd for me, but I'm also sitting in my home and you're all here with me. I'm excited. So in addition to knowing how passionate I am, I want to tell you about a couple of other things before I get started. I teach in a Bachelor of Science program, and I'm very used to saying a bachelor's degree. I don't mean that here. If I accidentally say that, I'm not being exclusive in that. I'll hopefully correct myself. But when I get wound up, I might just default to that language. What I'm going to talk about is for students in associate degree programs, bachelor programs, and some of these things could even be brought into high school psychology courses. The third thing I want you to know about me that makes me different from a lot of other people who talk about careers is I do not tell my students what they can do with their degrees. So what you're not going to hear me do today is tell you what they can do. We're going to talk about how you can help them figure out what is a good fit for them and help them better understand the options for them that don't require a graduate degree. All right, so let's get started. You don't need to know anything about careers to do the things that I'm going to talk about today. And the reason is because your students are going to teach you. So the approach I take really puts it on the student in order to discover ways that they can use their degree, put it on them in a good way. And this approach gives maximum flexibility to their interests. If we were to try to give students a list of things they can do without a graduate degree, we'd end up having to create buckets, and then the buckets don't become very meaningful, right? So, because there's so much diversity in the kinds of things they can do. And once we get to that categorical label, it doesn't help them anymore. So we're going to talk about an approach where you're going to learn a lot from what they do, and they're going to be able to find things that are really specific to them. So my goals are for you to leave this webinar with enthusiasm for supporting career preparation. I love that icon. I mean, this is me. If you saw me presenting, I move around a lot. My chair is probably going to spin a few times. But I want to raise your enthusiasm. I'm guessing some of you are already enthusiastic. But those of you who are questioning what your role might be, I hope you leave feeling really good about what you learned through this webinar. I want you to leave with one simple activity that you see easy to insert or implement in your courses. I'm going to give you more than one, but I want you to leave with at least one. You say, yep, I can put that in and it won't be really difficult to do. And then at the end, I have a list of resources. You're going to see some resources along the way but I have a variety of resources that you can use to support your efforts. All right, I like to start with a conversation. If anyone's heard me speak on this before, these are my friends, Gemma, Ann, and Hector. And they're going to have a conversation that I think our students hear and I think our alumni are participating in. So Gemma starts with, "Hey, Ann, what was your college major?" No surprise, Ann says, "Psychology." And Hector said, "Psychology?" Gemma says, "But you're the VP of Talent Acquisition at a pain treatment research company." It's going to get rough, people. Hold on. Ann says, "I know. What a waste of time and money. I should have majored in business or biochemistry." And then Hector says, "Yeah, then you'd be using your degree." Oh, it's painful. And Gemma says, "None of my friends who majored in psychology are using their degrees." And Anne concludes the conversation with, "Yeah, you can't do anything without a graduate degree in psychology." This is just so heartbreaking for me, because it's not true. Now, there are issues with the logic, and I usually stop at this point, and I'll say to my students, because we talk about this, is Anne has the job. So what's the problem with the major? Are you missing some skills or knowledge that you need for this job? But I'm guessing you probably bring things to this job from psychology that are important. A VP of Talent Acquisition is the person who's helping make really good hiring decisions. I can think of many topics from psychology that are relevant to that. So our issue has been that our Gemmas, our Anns, our Hectors are graduating and they don't have that ability to articulate what they're bringing out into the world of work. And that's going to be a very important focus of what we're going to talk about today. All right, now this is something else that makes me sad. Once we get through this, we're going to get to the good stuff. But this is disheartening for me. This is a Gallup poll result, or these are results from a Gallup poll that's been done over many years. And the question is, what is the confidence in U.S. higher education? So we have 3 points for several years. I'm going to start at the left side with 2015 and end at 2024 on the right side. I'm not going to talk about the points in the middle. But we're looking at respondents' selections of the options. Do you have a great deal or quite a lot of confidence? That's going to be the top line in the figure, the solid line. The middle response would be, "I have some confidence." That's the dotted line in the middle. And then the dashed line at the bottom is very little or no confidence in U.S. higher education. So if you look at 2015, only 10% of respondents said they have very little or no confidence, and almost 60% said they had a great deal or quite a lot of confidence. So we were at about 90%, at least having some or a great deal or quite a lot of confidence in U.S. higher education. We move over to the far right side, 2024, and that 10% of very little or no confidence is now up to 32%. And that middle level is about the same. That some is still about 32%, but our almost 60% great deal or quite a lot of confidence is now down to 36%. And we can talk about reasons for that. There's so much discussion about return on investment, the cost of a college degree. All of those things are very, very important. Those conversations are being held around our future students, our current students, but sort of a misunderstanding about what the purpose of a college degree is. What is the purpose of it? And so that takes me to what I call the fallacy of the ists, the ians, and the ers. That for your major to be valuable, your job should end. Your job title should be your major plus an ending. So psychology, psychologist. If you become a psychologist, then your undergraduate degree was worth it. Biology major, you become a biologist, good, you did the right thing. We can say math, mathematician, history, historian, philosophy, philosopher. This really is the oversimplified mindset that people have when they're thinking about degrees. And unfortunately, we have a lot of alumni who have graduated without the ability to really recognize what they got from their degree. Their memory is, "I learned a lot of concepts. I loved certain courses," but they don't really understand the whole package of what they're leaving with. And because we typically support the general education curriculum through our courses, we really do know, and we include a lot of skills and knowledge related to those skills that are valuable. but we need to help students figure that out. And when we do, we'll have alumni who have figured it out. And I'm hoping that becomes a feedback loop so that we see less and less of this as people are including more career preparation in their teaching. All right, here's another problem we have is this thing called career day. I don't know about you, I had a career day in kindergarten. We were supposed to line up and take our turns telling the teacher what we wanted to be, and she would write it on a piece of paper and we would draw it. Well, it makes sense for children developmentally, cognitively. They're going to have simple buckets of occupations. And you see in this picture, there's an outfit that goes with it. But a lot of jobs that people have don't have outfits, and they don't have big occupational titles. So when we think about occupational titles, we're talking about things like firefighter, police officer, chef, biomedical engineer, psychologist. They're titles that most people can recognize and have some idea of what that might be. But in reality, most of our students graduate and they end up with job titles. Here are some of my favorites. Charge Integrity Coordinator, Data Support and Solutions Analyst, Practice Supervisor, Opioid Navigator, Community Educator. I doubt there's very many students start college saying, I'm going to be a psych major because I'm going to be an opioid navigator. I'm guessing their parents might say, I'm not sure what navigation means in that, but we, you know, what is your plan? But I really don't think that students are thinking about these very specific job titles that employers are going to give the jobs that they're going to be seeking. So because job titles don't have these nice, simple keywords that students can search for, they hit a wall pretty quickly when trying to figure out what they can do without going to graduate school. All right. One of my favorite concepts is psychological literacy. And there are a few variations on this definition. This is my favorite. Psychological literacy is the ability to apply the knowledge and skills gained through the psychology major to solve real-world problems. Those problems can be personal decision-making. It might be career-related. It also might be through community service work in trying to improve someone's local community. So this is a very general idea that our students are graduating with knowledge and skills. We want them to be able to apply that in solving real-world problems. So I took that one step further because my focus is on career preparation, and I coined this term psychology workforce literacy. So specifically, I believe our students should be able to articulate the application of psychology knowledge and skills to diverse occupational domains. And one of the measures that I use to determine that my students can do this is at the end of their undergraduate degree, they do something called the Yes You Can assignment. And the Yes You Can assignment is a response to the prompt that you can't do anything with, for my students, a bachelor's degree in psychology. For students at a two-year school, it might be you can't do anything with an associate's degree in psychology. So they have to provide a response that shows that they're able to discuss specific applications of psychology knowledge and skills to different occupational domains, different jobs. All right, and this is the way I think about career preparation. When I say career preparation, I'm talking about just an umbrella term that captures a process. And there are two important pieces to this process. One, that it's active, and the other is understanding it's iterative. Okay, so the active part is the students need to be engaged. So we go back to my point earlier that I don't tell students what they can do. And if any of you want to provide lists, that's for you. And I've got some resources where you can send students to hear about a lot of different specific jobs that they might, or occupations they might pursue. But the other part that's really important is the iterative piece. There's this process of reflecting on who am I, what are my interests, what are my values, what do I know, what do I like, planning, how can I prepare myself for a future, engaging in some kind of professional development. For me, that means working on your skills, working on the various skills employers value, and we're going to talk about what those are in a minute. And career exploration, thinking about what are the courses that I like, taking on part-time jobs, volunteering, internships, and then coming back and reflecting again, doing some planning to intentionally develop professionally and intentionally explore career options that might be of interest. And then we come back around again and again. Okay, so when I think about that career preparation, specifically the career exploration and professional development piece, I think about this is the time students are spending in our programs. They typically will start off with Intro to Psych. They might start with an introduction to the major course. They're going to end at graduation. Maybe at the end they have a capstone course or a built-in internship. We call ours field placement. The spots along the way you can think of as content courses, and I only have a few in this because, it's a pre-built image. I didn't create it. If I did, I would have a lot of dots along the way. But there might be 3 or 4 courses that really get their attention and really light them up in terms of topics. For me, I also think of these points along the way as where we have our career preparation courses. So our career seminar series is 3 courses. Our students have an introduction to the major course, then they proceed through these 3 1-credit courses. That was my solution to the difficult dilemma that if you offer one, you have to figure out where to put it. And they're not all ready at the same time. If they're second years, they're really in the, I don't know what I want to do. If they're getting towards the end, they're more in the place, hopefully, of I need to think about how to write cover letters, maybe write applications to graduate school, effectively answer questions in an interview. So really different places. So we've got ours spread out along the way. But at any of these points, even if we go back to thinking of these as individual courses, that can be a place, not a careers course, but a content course where students can stop, reflect, do some planning around their professional development and career exploration. All right, so let's get to the meat of it all. This is why you came here. The question is, how can you support the development of psychology, workforce literacy, and career preparation? I have a warning. Don't attempt to do everything on the next slide. I'm going to read what they are, and we're going to go through most of them, but I'm not suggesting you would take on all of these at one time. So I want you to hear as I'm going through them in more detail, what are the ones that you think you could implement fairly easy into your courses. So the first is skill development. We're all developing skills in our courses, and we're going to talk about skills and how students might learn to articulate those skills. You can include information that connects knowledge in your course to the skills employers value. I'll just give you a taste of that. I'm a social psychologist by training, and I think a lot about the employer valued skill called collaboration. I think, well, there's a lot students learn from social psychology that is relevant to collaboration, but they don't necessarily put those 2 things together. So if a student were applying for a job where collaboration is valuable, one of the most important things they could say is not only do I have a lot of collaborative experience and I have people who can speak to my collaborative skills, but I know things that will help others collaborate. I know some of the ways that we can make sure we don't fall into some of the traps of collaborating, and we can be most efficient in our collaboration to yield the best outcome. But they're not used to articulating those 2 things together. I'm going to give you more examples of that in a few minutes. Doing what I call content-specific job searches. When I say content-specific, I mean the content of your course. So using my example, in social psychology, if students really like that course, having them look for jobs where they can use the knowledge and skills from my course with their degree. Okay, if it's a child development course, having them look for actual jobs, because I also believe that we spend our time in the abstract world of what you can do and not in the literal world of what's out there, or the real world of what's out there. And the best way to know what's out there is to see the jobs that are being posted by employers. Again, that's not a list of jobs that we can create for them, but having them find jobs that employers are seeking to fill. Occupation comparisons, you could call that job comparisons. I'm going to use occupation here more generally, and we'll talk about an assignment related to that. And then we're not going to talk about alumni guests a lot, but I encourage you, once you are identifying students who are really excited to take the content from your courses and they're finding really interesting jobs without a graduate degree, keeping track of them and inviting them back to talk to the students in that course. For me personally, that has been one of the most powerful things that I've been able to do. Our students, they believe us, but they really believe people who came out of their program, and they get to see that they're happy. And one of the things my alumni guests almost always do, which is funny because I don't pay them to do this, I teach research methods. They often will look around them and say, because these are done by Zoom, they hold up their research methods textbook and say, I'm using this all the time for my job. Really, really powerful. Okay, so for those of you who aren't aware, APA is this incredible document, the APA Guidelines for the Undergraduate Psychology Major. This is version 3.0. There are 5 goals. The 5th goal is devoted to personal and professional development. So any of the things that I talk about today, if you're part of the assessment process for your program, you see ways here you can connect these activities to helping assess the development of important outcomes that are described by the American Psychological Association. And by the way, outcomes are written for 2-year degrees and then the bachelor's degree. So both associate and bachelor level outcomes are written in that document. Okay, so now the skillful psychology student. This is a project that I had such a great time working on with, I think there were a total of 9 of us. And I believe Sue shared this document with you. You can't really read it on the screen, but what I want you to notice from this is there are 5 skill domains: cognitive, communication, personal, social, and technological. And we identified 17 skills that consistently come up in different ways that reflect the skills employers value. So the cognitive domain includes 5 skills: analytical thinking, critical thinking, creativity, information management, judgment, and decision making. And you can't see this very well, but next to that are descriptors. And there are terms that students are likely to see that employers use in job postings. So an employer might not include analytical thinking in a job description, but they are very likely to say, we're looking for someone who can solve complex problems, who can attend to details, plan proactively, and display comfort with ambiguity. So we go from the big high level of 5 skill domains to the specific 17 skills, and then each of those with some clues for where it might show up in a job description. On the right of the slide, you see the methods that we use. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I think it's important to know that we used 3 different methods to come up with these skills. One, my part, was to look at the employer surveys out there. AAC&U's employer surveys, they do these regularly. NACE, National Association for Colleges and Employers, and then the World Economic Forum. So I looked at, well, what are the surveys saying and what are the consistencies across those surveys? What do employers say they value? Karen Knopfel looked at Guidelines 2.0 because that's the version that was out at the time. And she looked at the attributes that 2.0 included that describe our psychology majors. And she put those into searches, the job search engines. I think she might have used Indeed. And she wanted to see, well, what skills show up with those attributes? And then Jay Van Kirk took the approach of using the word psychology to search for jobs in, I think, again, it was Indeed. It may have been some other search engine. But looking to see if you put psychology in the search, what are the skills that show up in those job descriptions? And that's how we came up with this list. Okay, now after the skillful psychology student came out, a wonderful group of individuals, a large, huge group of individuals worked on something called the Market Ready Psychology Major. And what their approach was to take the skills from the skillful psychology student and think about the courses we teach in most undergraduate curricula. So abnormal psychology, developmental psychology, and so on. And they identified skills that they thought would be most likely to show up in those courses. So you see a few things here. We have syllabus statements. They provide syllabus statements you could put right into your syllabi that help you articulate for your students, these are the skills you're going to get through this course. We're going to work on these skills through this course. You're going to demonstrate these skills in this course. And then they have sample resumes. This is a resume template that has that skills section so that they have a way of articulating the skills they have that employers value. But they went even deeper than that. They provide you with slides. So if you want to include slides in your courses to make that explicit connection between the skills they're going to develop in your course and what employers value, they have sets like this for a variety of courses. Here it's Intro to Psych. And so they say transferable skills you'll develop in this course. You can see they list 4, and then they continue with the first one on that slide is inclusivity. So see, what can someone who's developed inclusivity do? And then how will you develop inclusivity in this course? What does inclusivity look like in the workplace? And then I love this. They even have hyperlinks to what are examples of jobs that require inclusivity? And those are just examples. Obviously, lots of other jobs. So that's the market ready psychology major. So Karen Knopfel and Aaron Richmond were 2 people I got to know very well through working on the Skillful Psychology student. And Karen and I talked a lot at that point about it's not just the skills, it's the knowledge about the skills. And so we got Aaron involved in this conversation, and we came up with this concept of the secret sauce. We believe that psychology majors have a secret sauce. Not only do they develop cognitive communication, personal, social, and technological skills through the major, but they have knowledge about those skills. So the example I gave before was skills around collaboration or knowledge specific to collaboration. So here's just some examples that we have provided. We gave a talk at ACT last year on this. So a concept that they might learn in a course, convergent and divergent thinking, falls into the cognitive domain, specifically can be used to think about the skill creativity. So not only might they have an opportunity to demonstrate or work on their creativity skills in a class, but if the class includes the concepts of convergent and divergent thinking, then now they know how, if they're in the workplace, they might create the environment where creativity can occur. All right, help people to be more creative who might be feeling a little bit stuck. Other concepts, routes to persuasion, part of communication, specifically oral communication, zone of optimal functioning, personal domain, self-regulation as a skill, team processes, the social domain, and specific to leadership and management, and a growth and fixed mindset, the technological domain, specifically flexibility and adaptability to new systems. So we've talked about skills, making sure students are aware of the skills in the class, and then helping them make these direct and specific connections between concepts they're learning and the skills employers value. All right, now we get to my all-time favorite assignment that I give my students. Content-specific job searches. So the basic assignment is something like this. For our next class meeting, please bring 2 postings for jobs that interest you, use the knowledge and skills developed through this course, and that you'll be qualified for with your degree. Okay, so come in with 2 postings. I'm going to tell you, the first time I gave this assignment, I was terrified to go to the next class meeting because I was afraid they were going to show up really angry with me, because it's not easy to, well, I shouldn't say it's not easy. It's a commitment of time. And especially since I lay down some pretty specific rules. The rules are: 1, unlike Jay Van Kirk, who used psychology to help us create as a keyword search term to help us with the Skillful Psychology student, I say do not put psychology in your search bar. And the reason for that is it's automatically going to narrow the options, and you're going to miss out on a lot of really interesting jobs that employers didn't think to write psychology in the job description for. So that's one rule. Don't use psychology as a search term. Now, here's where it's a little tricky for me. I can tell my students use bachelor instead. I say just put in bachelor. And I thought about this a lot before today, and I thought that still works for students in associate's degree programs, because the truth is employers will say preferred or required. So they might say preferred bachelor's degree, but they are not requiring it. And that distinction is important for them to understand. And to know that it's a preference doesn't mean that they won't be considered if they have an associate's degree. All right. So put in bachelor's. And then the second thing is please read the job descriptions. Don't decide based on the title, because we already talked about real job titles are confusing. They're not very informative sometimes, may not be all that, I don't know, interesting to want to pursue. So I tell them read the job descriptions. Now, when you put in bachelor's, there are a lot of jobs that can't fit them. So I didn't put this as a rule here, but I do tell them that it can't be a job that requires a very specific licensure that has education attached to it. For example, nursing. So if it's a nursing job that requires a bachelor or requires a license for it that typically comes with very specialized education, we're going to rule that out for this purpose, just for this purpose. Read the job description and select jobs that interest you. So that was on the other slide. I underscore that. Please be looking for things that really interest you, because it's going to make the rest more fun. Okay, so here, then what I do is I share a spreadsheet and I have them put in their job title. I already have their names in. These are made up names of students, but the job titles you see are job titles that students have actually submitted with their assignment. And for this spreadsheet, I asked them to identify up to 3 course concepts. Some of them struggle with certain jobs. They may not find it, or for, particular course that might be more difficult. And then course skills. So 3 different course skills that they're seeing in the job posting, right? So I didn't fill this in with their responses because that would be really overwhelming for you to see. But, for an academic advisor, they would be able to identify specific concepts they've learned about. Maybe they learned about active listening and what that means in terms of interpersonal communication. And then course skills they may have practiced in the course would be organizing information in a written way that can help someone to understand a curriculum map, for example. They always find the criminal investigator special agent. It always comes up. Data analyst. One of my favorites on this list is gaming and digital assets coordinator. And another one on here I want to highlight is psychometrist. I meet a lot of students who say they want to be neuroscientists or neuropsychologists. It takes a while for them to figure out the difference between the two. We have a lot of conversations around that. The psychometrist job, if you haven't heard of this position, is the person who administers the assessments that neuropsychologists use to make clinical decisions. So they're the ones actually administering the assessments. They may do a little bit of the scoring. They don't do the interpreting. They can do that job without a bachelor's degree. All right. So really, really interesting job directly related to psychology. I want to come back to this, the career preparation as an active and iterative process. When I give my students an assignment like that, one of the things we'll talk about is, well, you're not ready to apply for the job yet. You're still in school. But what can you do? Well, first you can identify what you already have that would make you a competitive applicant. Who am I already in this list of skills and knowledge and requirements and tasks? Can I meet the responsibilities of that job? What am I missing? What skills are they looking for that I should pay attention to and make sure I'm working on so that I'm competitive? But I also tell them there's no reason not to reach out to that employer if you're looking for an internship and see, is there any opportunity here for an internship? Because I really like this job. And I really like this job and I want to be prepared for it when I graduate. And I want to learn more. I want to learn more about what this position entails. So internship or part-time job. So there's lots of ways they can use that information now instead of just saying, well, that's down the road and in the future. Course planning. What are some courses that might help you out? And this is one thing the students, they roll their eyes at me, but they know there are certain skills that they avoid. When they know a course requires presentations, sometimes they say, well, I'll take something else instead because I'm afraid of doing a presentation or I don't want to do that. Or The course requires a lot of teamwork, and I don't want to do teamwork, so I'm not interested in that course. I'm going to avoid it. And so this gives them an opportunity to see there is a real benefit to making sure they're working on their skills in a safe place while they're still at the undergraduate level. Some variations on this, I like to give students the opportunity to think beyond. Some of them do have interest in going to graduate school, and I don't want them to feel left out, but I always make sure the bachelor level the bachelor level task is built in for everyone so they don't skip it. So you can have them look at jobs that they could get with an associate's degree, bachelor's degree, master's degree, doctoral degree. And when I have students do that, I don't have them follow a direct path necessarily. Some will. They know they want mental health, so everything seems mental health related. But they don't have to do that. They can be looking at doctoral level programs in a variety of work spaces or environments. All right. Occupation comparisons. This is something I love doing. I have them look a little bit bigger at occupations. If you're not familiar with ONET, ONET is a great free resource online that students can search for specific occupations. My next move is sort of a nicer, gentler presentation of the information. You can see it's very well organized. Here I put in an occupation, a health education specialist, and they can find out what health education specialists do, knowledge, associated skills, abilities. They can find out about education typically needed, job outlook. Sorry. They can look by state, see salary information, and then on the right, they have technology, but also some suggested related occupations they may be interested in. What I'll have my students do is pick 3 occupations and compare them. I'm sorry. Those occupations might be very similar. They may be very diverse. I had a student pick psychologist, lawyer, and I think physical therapist one year. And I have them create something. They can do an animated video, infographic, a brochure or handout. They could do a poster. What's my other one? I thought I have them do infographic typically. So they have lots of ways they can present it, but they're supposed to show the synthesis of this, really showing what's similar and what's different. That process is really helpful for them because some of them lock into one thing and they don't want to consider anything else. And this helps them see some other options that might turn out to be a better fit for them. Another way to compare occupations is using Career One Stop. I'm so sorry. With Career One Stop, it's also drawing information from the ONET database and allows students to side-by-side compare 2 occupations. So data scientists, database administrators, I thought they were interesting ones to compare. And they can see a lot of different information related to those things.
You're muted, Stacy.
I was trying to save you guys from my cough. All right, I want to talk about project assessment, one of my favorite places to go for really great assessments. There is an assessment Ashley Wagner put in as a comparison project. So if you wanted to read about how you can include occupation comparisons in your course, that's there. My Yes You Can assignment my students do at the end of my program where they respond to those digs that they can't do anything with their degree. So there's lots of really great tools in project assessment. Society for Teaching of Psychology Division II's website, teachpsych.org, has resources for teachers of psychology and has some things that are career related in there. And then 3 podcasts I want to talk about. One is Psych Mike. What I love about Psych Mike is that this was started by someone who was a student at NYU, Maya Metzer. And Maya, as an undergraduate, had no idea what she was going to do with her degree. And her solution was to start hosting these virtual events. And this was during COVID. And then she decided to shift to a podcast model. So they're recorded interviews. So when you have students who want to see lists of things they might do and hear people talk about those careers, great place to go. Brittany Avila at University of Nevada, Reno, has the Career Journey podcast, and she talks to people about how they got there from psychology. So lots of diverse, interesting careers and people talking about sort of their path to getting there. And then through the Psych Sessions umbrella, I have a careers podcast called Careers. I put out one season. I'm working on the next season right now. It'll have a different focus. Season 1, I talked to teachers of psychology who incorporate career preparation experiences within their courses. So different activities and assignments that they do for students in a variety of courses. So really great people interviewed for that series. I want to come back to what I'd like to see as the end of the conversation, rather than what we saw earlier in this talk. I'd like, when Hector says you're not using your degree, what a waste, Gemma, of course, says, yeah, what does psychology have to do with your job? And I'd like our graduates to say, oh my, where do I begin? To be able to articulate those connections really clearly. They know the skills they developed in their courses. They know employers value those skills. They know the concepts they've learned that will help them be better in performing those skills or demonstrating those skills. And they know when they chose this job they're in, it was based on this process of exploring and developing, and they see the connection between their major and what they're doing. So my question is, did I meet my goals? Are you enthusiastic? I know I said a lot. I talk very quickly, but I hope you left feeling good about it and excited about identifying some simple activity that you can implement in your courses. And hopefully you see there are plenty of resources you can use to support your efforts. The hyperlinks are in the slides. And if there's anything missing that I talked about you'd like more of, you can always send me an email. So now let's open it up for questions.